Let me ask you something that might break your heart a little bit. When was the last time you actually celebrate your birthday? Not just scrolled past the notifications, not just said thanks out of obligation, but truly celebrate it, the way you did when you were 7 years old, watching the candles flicker, knowing the whole world stopped just for you. Now, you wake up, check your phone, maybe your mom calls, or your bank SMS, and then you move on. You tell people, I don't really celebrate, but here's what you're not telling anyone. People who treat their birthday like any other day aren't cold. They're not emotionless. In fact, they're often the most reflective people you'll ever meet. They've just learned something the rest of us are still figuring out: how to hide expectations because disappointment taught them to. Psychologically, birthdays are emotional mirrors. They don't just mark another year. They reflect how you feel about being alive, how you relate to attention, and how comfortable you are being truly seen. When someone says, I don't care about my birthday, they're really saying one of two things. I don't need validation anymore, or I stopped expecting it. And there's a massive difference between maturity and emotional withdrawal. Some people genuinely grow out of birthday excitement, not from sadness, but from peace. They've found meaning in ordinary days. Life itself becomes the celebration. But for others, the story gets complicated. Birthdays bring subtle anxiety, not because of aging, because of memory. Maybe birthdays remind them of when they felt forgotten. Or maybe they once cared too much and got burned by unmet expectations. So instead of saying, I hope someone remembers, they say, it's just another day. Protection disguised as indifference. This is where it gets fascinating. When we experience repeated emotional letdowns, the brain begins to lower the bar. Psychologists call this emotional self-protection. You reduce anticipation to avoid disappointment. You teach yourself not to hope too loudly. The brain prioritizes stability over excitement when excitement has led to pain. But here's the twist. Over time, that same protection quietly dulls joy. The heart that once shielded itself becomes too careful. You start walking through your own life like a guest at someone else's party, polite, observant, but distant. Think about how many people smile and say, oh, I don't really do birthdays. But later, they quietly replay the day in their mind, noticing who didn't message, who forgot, who said nothing. We all do it, even the ones who claim they don't care. Because caring is human. Even pretending not to care is a form of caring, just inverted, compressed, hidden under a shell of composure. Psychologists call this avoidant validation behavior. You convince yourself you don't need recognition because part of you fears not getting it. So when you meet someone who treats their birthday like any other day, don't assume they're emotionally detached. Sometimes they've just made peace with disappointment. They've traded excitement for control. But control has a cost, because underneath it's just another day lies an emotional truth. We all want to be seen, not praised, not celebrated with grand gestures, but genuinely seen. Birthdays are symbolic. They mark existence itself, the one day that belongs entirely to you, not for what you've achieved, not for who you're with, but simply because you exist. And for many, that reminder brings mixed emotions, gratitude and loneliness, often both at once. Because birthdays remind us of time, how far we've come, how far we haven't. For some, treating their birthday like a normal day keeps time from feeling too heavy. If I don't make it a big deal, they think, it won't feel like another year slipping away. There's also something cultural happening. In childhood, birthdays are social milestones. They connect us to belonging. But in adulthood, that spotlight feels strange. Many adults wrestle with wanting to be noticed while not wanting to seem needy. Because here's what happens. When you grow up being the responsible one, the strong one, the giver, your mind internalizes a message. Your joy comes second. You downplay your needs. You remember everyone else's day but forget your own. The more emotionally self-reliant you become, the harder it feels to receive love without suspicion. So birthdays become neutral zones, places where vulnerability would normally surface but gets replaced by practicality. It's fine, you say. Let's just get through the day. But behind that quiet tone, your mind processes dozens of emotions. Nostalgia for childhood excitement, subtle sadness at lost connections, gratitude for survival, soft longing for simplicity. Even if you think you've outgrown birthdays, part of you still remembers what it felt like to be celebrated without hesitation. There's also a layer of temporal self-awareness, looking back at who you were a year ago and measuring the gap between who you wanted to be and who you are now. Sometimes that gap is uncomfortable. So birthdays feel like mirrors, not parties. But here's the truth most people miss. When someone treats their birthday like a normal day, they're not rejecting joy. They're redefining it. They're saying, I no longer need the world's permission to feel good about being alive. That shift, from external celebration to internal acknowledgement, marks one of the quietest forms of maturity. What starts to matter isn't gifts or parties or posts. It's alignment. Did I live this year in a way that feels true? Did I grow? Did I show up when it mattered? Maybe celebration now looks like a walk alone, cooking your favorite meal, taking a quiet day to think. Not loud joy, soft joy. Still, there's an undercurrent. While some people feel genuinely content, others quietly wish they didn't have to be. They wish someone else would take the initiative. They wish they didn't have to pretend it doesn't matter. That tension between wanting to be seen and wanting to seem unbothered is one of the most human contradictions there is. The longing to be noticed without asking. So a birthday becomes a subtle test. Not one you announce, but one your mind quietly observes. Who remembered? Who reached out without a reminder? Who still sees you when you're not visible? That's not weakness, that's humanity. Stripped of all tradition and expectation, birthdays are checkpoints of consciousness. They force you to pause and ask, am I living honestly? Am I becoming someone I recognize? Do I like the story I'm telling with my life? When you treat your birthday like a normal day, you're not avoiding these questions. You're facing them quietly, privately, without an audience. Not every kind of growth needs to be broadcast. Some growth is invisible, reacting differently than you used to, forgiving faster, finding beauty in moments that once went unnoticed. Maybe that's the truest celebration, when you don't need the day to feel extraordinary because you've learned to find the extraordinary inside the ordinary. Still, here's a truth worth remembering. Even the most self-sufficient souls deserve to feel special once in a while. The ones who treat their birthdays like any other day are often the same people who hold space for everyone else's milestones. They're the quiet anchors who remember your important dates. And sometimes, those people forget that they too deserve light. One text can still make someone's day. One voice note, one call, one moment of presence. To them, it's not about the size of the celebration. It's about sincerity. About being reminded that their quiet existence still ripples outward, still matters. Deep down, none of us truly want to be invisible. We just want to be loved in the language we understand. Some want fireworks, others want peace. Some want surprises, others want consistency. Some want crowds, others want one person who listens. And that's okay. If your birthday feels ordinary, if you went to work, made your coffee, checked your messages, and carried on, maybe that's not something to fix. Maybe it's something to honor. What you're really saying is, my life is already full enough to not need one day to make it meaningful. That's not detachment. That's gratitude in disguise. But at the same time, let yourself be soft. If you miss the excitement you once had, it's okay to feel that too. Missing your younger self doesn't mean you've regressed. It means you're remembering what innocence felt like before the world taught you restraint. Perhaps the greatest gift you can give yourself is this. Remember the child who once counted down to midnight with glowing eyes, who believed one day could hold infinite magic. That child is still inside you, waiting not for a party, but for acknowledgement. Waiting for you to whisper, "Hey, I see you. We made it another year." That's the kind of celebration that doesn't fade when the candles go out. So if your birthday ever feels like just another day, don't feel guilty. It's not emptiness, it's evolution. The mind learning that meaning doesn't need noise. And yet, if someone remembers, let them. Let them say your name. Let them remind you that you matter. Because you do, even on the days that feel ordinary. Especially then. Because maybe that's the most beautiful thing about growing up. Learning that celebration doesn't always need confetti. Sometimes it just needs awareness. A moment of stillness. A deep breath. You don't have to make a wish. You already the one. A living continuation of every version of yourself that made it here. And that's worth celebrating quietly or not, every single year. If you enjoyed this video, please hit subscribe. It helped the channel grow.